Sweet potato pie. Nobody needed a measuring cup to know how to make sweet potato pie the right way back then. In kitchens that smelled of nutmeg, cinnamon, and something just about to burn, but never did, grandmothers worked from memory and instinct. Sweet potato pie wasn't just dessert. It was warmth, memory, and togetherness baked into one golden dish. This was a time when sugar had to be stretched and butter was treasured. But when a pie was needed, it came through. Flavored not just with spices, but with care. The sweet potatoes were baked until soft enough to melt in the hand, mashed with a worn fork, and seasoned to perfection with what was on hand. A splash of evaporated milk, a flick of cinnamon, and always that secret ingredient, love. Crusts were rolled with whatever was available: old bottles, flour-dusted hands, or a repurposed glass jar. But no matter how it was made, that crust held a legacy. Families didn't need measuring spoons. They had rhythm and memory. And the smell? It drifted from the oven and wrapped around the whole house. Kids peeked in through the crack in the oven door. Grown folks made excuses to pass through the kitchen. The first slice was never just a bite. It was a moment, a hush, a nod, and a bite that said, "Yes, she did it again." Sweet potato pie wasn't about ingredients. It was about presence, about turning what you had into something worth remembering. Molasses pound cake. Molasses pound cake was never fancy, but it was always rich. Not in money, but in meaning. The dark sweetness of molasses stood in for the refined white sugar most families couldn't afford. But nobody missed it. Molasses brought depth, soul, and story. This cake wasn't whipped up on a whim. It was mixed slow, with strong arms and a steady rhythm. Each ingredient added by memory, not by measure. Molasses was poured until the batter shone dark gold. Then came the spices: cinnamon, cloves, ginger, all measured in about that much. It baked heavy, dense, like it was made to last. And when it cooled, the outside had a sticky crust, the inside soft and rich. It wasn't showy, it didn't need frosting. It stood proudly on its own. Served at Christmas, church gatherings, and birthdays, it was the kind of cake that meant something had happened, something good. Children knew the smell before they saw it. Adults took their slice slow, savoring every bite. And no matter what else was on the table, molasses pound cake was the first to go. Chess pie. Chess pie had a quiet kind of power. No flashy toppings, no bold colors, just butter, eggs, sugar, and a sprinkle of cornmeal turning into something magical. It was a pie that silenced a room with the first bite. The filling shimmered when sliced, smooth and custardy with just enough crust at the edge to make a fork tap. That balance of sweetness and texture, that came from grandmothers who knew how to work with what they had. During the 1960s, when cupboards were low and stores didn't always welcome every customer, this pie came through. No fruit needed, no fancy creams, just pantry basics and a lot of know-how. It wasn't rare to see it sitting next to a sweet potato pie at holiday tables, both held in equal reverence. Because chess pie was more than dessert. It was a declaration that even in scarcity, something beautiful could rise. Cornmeal tea cakes. Part cookie, part biscuit, all heart. Cornmeal tea cakes had grit in texture and grace in flavor. They were the kind of treat grandmothers made on a slow afternoon, always in batches that disappeared faster than expected. Cornmeal gave them their signature bite. Not too sweet, not too soft, but just right. Flavored with nutmeg and sometimes a splash of vanilla, they held the warmth of home in every bite. Tea cakes cooled on windowsills and disappeared before they were even cold. Children's fingers left telltale crumbs on every surface. But no one fussed too hard, because those little stolen moments were part of the joy. They weren't meant to impress, they were meant to comfort. They were tradition in a bite, familiar, golden, and full of love. Bread pudding with vanilla sauce. When bread began to go stale, it wasn't thrown out. It was transformed. Bread pudding was the magic of making do, soaking old slices in milk, sugar, and spice, and turning them into something divine. The pudding baked slowly, filling the home with the smell of nutmeg, cinnamon, and warmth. Raisins often dotted the top, plumped and bursting. But the real crown jewel was the vanilla sauce. Poured warm over the pudding, it was like kindness in liquid form, sweet, smooth, and impossible to resist. This was often the last dessert made, using what was left after the pies and cakes. But that didn't make it any less special. In many homes, it was the grand finale, a celebration of nothing going to waste and everything becoming something wonderful. Blackberry cobbler, without sugar. When sugar was low, sweetness still found its way in. Blackberry cobbler was one of those desserts where fruit did all the talking. Picked fresh from vines behind the house or along dusty paths, blackberries held a tart, wild sweetness. Grandmothers would cook them down just enough to thicken, maybe adding a spoonful of molasses if sugar was scarce. Then came the crust, simple biscuit dough or even cornbread batter, spread right on top. Baked until golden and bubbling, the cobbler came out looking humble but tasting heavenly. It was spooned straight from the dish, served warm, sometimes with a splash of canned milk or cream if available. It reminded everyone that flavor didn't need to be bought. It could be gathered, foraged, and shared. Peach cobbler. Peach cobbler was a celebration all its own. It bubbled golden in the oven, its scent pulling neighbors from across the yard. Whether made from fresh Georgia peaches or canned ones saved for the occasion, it was always a centerpiece. The peaches were spiced with cinnamon, sugar, and a bit of lemon juice if available. Dough was dropped on top like clouds or rolled flat into a crust that soaked up all that juicy flavor. At church picnics and Sunday suppers, this dessert always brought folks back for seconds. And when paired with a scoop of homemade ice cream, it was pure summer magic, even in winter. Apple Brown Betty. Apple Brown Betty was comfort in a dish. Thin sliced apples layered with breadcrumbs, sugar, and spices. No crust, no frills, just the beauty of baked fruit and browned crumbs soaked in butter. Sometimes stale bread stood in for breadcrumbs, sometimes margarine stood in for butter, but the result was always the same, a warm, fragrant dish that tasted like home. It didn't pretend to be a pie, it didn't have to. It was what you made when you didn't have much but wanted to give everything. Banana pudding, stretched with few bananas. Banana pudding was a masterclass in stretching. A single banana, sliced thin, could serve a crowd when layered with homemade custard and vanilla wafers. The pudding was cooked low and slow on the stove, stirred with care, thickened just enough to hold its shape but still melt on the tongue. The banana slices softened in the heat, spreading flavor through every bite. Topped with a whipped meringue or just served plain, it was a dessert that brought kids running. And even when the bananas were few, the love was plenty. Persimmon pudding. Persimmons weren't always easy to find, but when they ripened, they were gold. Foraged in fields and fence rows, their flesh was pulpy, sweet, and full of flavor that couldn't be bottled. Persimmon pudding was dense, rich, and spiced like the holidays. It baked low and slow, turning into something between a bread and a custard. Served warm with a splash of milk or cream, it was an old-time favorite passed down quietly. The kind of dessert folks didn't talk about much, but always remembered. Peanut butter cookies. 3 ingredients. Just peanut butter, sugar, and an egg. That was all it took. These cookies were simplicity at its finest, and they worked every time. Rolled into little balls, flattened with the back of a fork in that classic crisscross, and baked just long enough to set, they came out soft in the middle and crisp at the edges. For households with tight budgets, they were a miracle, and for kids with sweet teeth, they were a blessing. Fast, easy, and gone in a flash. Molasses cookies. Molasses cookies had a dark, spicy chew to them, soft in the center, dusted with sugar, and packed with warmth. Made with pantry staples and flavored with whatever spice was on hand, they carried the scent of gingerbread without the fuss. Every bite was chewy, sticky, and comforting. They cooled on wax paper and were packed into tins, ready to be shared with neighbors, teachers, and visiting cousins. Tea cakes with nutmeg. Every grandmother had a version of tea cakes. Some soft, some a little crisp. But when nutmeg was added, it became something special. They were rolled out thin, cut by hand or with old cups, and baked just until the edges kissed golden. Their flavor was subtle, sweet, spiced, and gentle. Children sneaked them from cooling racks. Adults dunked them in coffee or tea, and everyone called them perfect. Jelly roll cake. This cake brought a little flair to the table. A soft sponge cake, rolled around homemade jam, grape, blackberry, or whatever was left from summer. It was simple but looked elegant, dusted with powdered sugar, sliced to show off the spiral, and served with pride. It traveled well, wrapped in wax paper and carried to church socials. And it always got a reaction when sliced, a quiet ooh from every corner of the room. Caramel cake. This was a cake of patience. The caramel icing took time, stirred low and slow, turning golden, bubbling gently, never rushed. The cake itself was tender and buttery, but the frosting, that was the soul. Poured warm over each layer, it settled thick and glossy, like melted treasure. Every family guarded their recipe, every slice was earned, and when served, it wasn't just dessert, it was a love letter from one generation to the next. Coconut cake. Coconut cake wasn't just dessert, it was devotion. Every step took patience. Coconuts had to be cracked open, grated by hand, and wrung for every drop of flavor. Grandmothers scraped until their fingers were sore, determined to create a holiday showstopper. The cake itself was light and fluffy, often made with real eggs and milk saved for the season. The icing shimmered like snow, a boiled sugar concoction poured over in thick layers. And then came the flurry of fresh coconut, falling like a blizzard of love across the top. It stood tall and proud on Christmas tables, reminding everyone that even the hardest times could bring something truly beautiful. Lemon chess pie. Lemon wasn't always easy to come by, so when a lemon chess pie hit the table, it was cause for celebration. Sometimes vinegar had to stand in, but when lemons were in the kitchen, grandmothers knew just what to do. The tangy custard filling contrasted beautifully with the buttery crust. Sweet, sour, smooth, and rich. It woke up your tongue with each bite. This wasn't just pie, it was a celebration of making the most out of what you had, turning tart into treasure. Raisin bread pudding. This dessert was the resurrection of leftovers. Nothing wasted. Old bread, a few raisins, and a handful of pantry staples could become something soul-stirring. The bread soaked in sweetened milk, filled with plump raisins and baked until golden. But the real magic came in the vanilla sauce, poured over warm pudding like a blessing. It was soft, sweet, and rich with memory. No one ever left a spoonful behind. Fried hand pies with fruit preserves. These little pies were handheld love letters, stuffed with fruit preserves, fig, apple, blackberry, or whatever was on hand. And fried until crisp, they were wrapped in napkins and passed to little hands. They were portable, practical, and powerful. Each one packed flavor and history in a single bite. Grandmothers sealed the edges with forks, pinched them tight, and slid them into hot grease until golden. Sugar wasn't needed when you had fruit and tradition. Sugar cookies. Plain? Maybe. Forgettable? Never. Sugar cookies were holiday staples, rolled out and cut with whatever shapes could be managed. Sometimes bottle caps, sometimes jelly jars. They were brushed with butter, dusted with sugar, and baked until just golden. The smell said, "It's Christmas." The taste said, "It's home." Children decorated them with shaky hands, sneaking bites of dough. Adults pretended not to notice. Gingerbread. Thick with molasses and spice, gingerbread was winter comfort baked into warm bricks of memory. It wasn't overly sweet, but it was rich with flavor. Cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, and ginger gave it a warmth that lingered. Cut into bars or soft cookies topped with just a drizzle of glaze, gingerbread wasn't about flash, it was about feeling. Sweet potato pudding. This was pie without the crust. Smoother than mashed potatoes, richer than custard, and full of cinnamon and nutmeg. It was baked in old enamel pans, often last in the oven, using up what was left. It came out golden, steaming, and deeply satisfying. Served with a spoon, often straight from the pan, it filled stomachs and hearts alike. Pecan pie. Pecans weren't always bought, they were foraged. Kids would gather them by the sackful, cracking them on porches or with hammers on concrete steps. The pie was sticky, sweet, and nutty, held together with syrup, sugar, and just enough egg to make it set. Every slice stuck to your fork and your fingers. It wasn't just dessert, it was community, and the flavor, pure Southern glory. Divinity candy. Clouds made edible. Divinity candy was whipped from egg whites and sugar syrup, demanding attention and perfect timing. One wrong move, and the whole batch flopped. But when it was done right, it melted on your tongue light as air. Vanilla scented and often flecked with chopped pecans, it was wrapped in wax paper and shared like treasure. This was more than candy, it was a test of skill passed down like a rite. Black walnut cake. This was the dessert with bark and bite. Black walnuts weren't easy to crack, but they were worth it. Their deep, earthy flavor made this cake a standout. Made during the holidays, often with foraged nuts, the cake was rich, dark, and fragrant. It carried the smell of the land and the labor. Each slice was a statement of gratitude, effort, and a connection to the land. Sweet molasses crinkle cookies. These cookies cracked like old roads and tasted like holidays remembered. Dark and spicy with a chewy center, they were rolled in sugar before baking, giving them that frosty top. Each bite had warmth, ginger, cloves, cinnamon, and just enough sweetness to soothe. Packed into tins, shared with neighbors, these cookies were memory-made edible. Coconut custard pie. Silky, smooth, and kissed with shredded coconut, this pie was elegance on a plate. It didn't shout. It whispered. Flavor, warmth, and quiet pride. The custard puffed gently as it baked, settling into something creamy and golden. Served chilled, the flakes of coconut offered just enough chew to keep every bite interesting. It was holiday magic, baked and served with a wink. Boiled custard. Served cold in glass mugs, boiled custard was eggnog's gentler cousin. No strong spirits here, just milk, sugar, and eggs whisked slowly until thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. Sipped after Christmas dinner or served alongside cookies, it was comfort in a cup, nutmeg on top, calm on the tongue. It tasted like peace. Spice cake with burnt sugar frosting. This cake smelled like December. The batter was alive with cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. The frosting, that was where the magic lived. Burnt sugar was caramel's older, deeper cousin. Toasted until just before bitter, it added depth you could feel. The cake itself was soft, tender, warm, like a wool blanket. The frosting was soul. Every bite grounded you. Apple stack cake. 7 thin layers of cake, each spread with homemade apple butter or stewed dried apples, stacked high and left to rest. This wasn't a quick dessert, it was a patient one. The longer it sat, the more the flavors melded. By Christmas Day, it was tender, spiced, and soaked with meaning. This was legacy in layers. It didn't shout to be noticed, but when the knife slid through, everyone watched. If this journey through sweet, soulful history brought back memories or sparked new ones, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share your favorite dessert in the comments, and let us know what you'd bring back to your table. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where food, culture, and history come together, because some recipes are too sacred to forget.